That was me.
Okay, I got it. I don't know if you...
Hi. It's Adam. I can't talk because I'm live.
Okay.
I got another one.
Oh, can I have it?
No.
Like just for tonight?
Okay, that was me.
Stop
I'm
that.
sorry.
You're going to keep walking by the speaker.
We've got a great Turn the mic up. Turn the mic up. Okay. Yeah, you don't want me singing. Okay, a couple of things. Just to remind everyone, we are recording this, and then it will be available to those that want to, get the rerun. And do we have any new members tonight that would like to introduce themselves? Ray? Ray, stand up. Ray's new to St. Louis and a newer woodworker, or longtime woodworker, and wood turning. Well, welcome, and we're glad you're here. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, we collected 81 toys tonight, but we also had a collection last Tuesday, so it gave us a few hundred. I wanted to remind everyone that we are really leaning on Brian Ellison in the back, keeping our web information current. So if you notice anything that doesn't look right, please get with him. Otherwise, we want to keep pushing everybody to the web for announcements, for schedules, for classes, and shop opens and things like that. So Brian's doing a great job on that. Also, I wanted to ask if we have any volunteers that want to sign up for the 23rd to paint the shed that Wayne and his team have finished enough that we should paint it, and then once it's painted, the garage door is going to go on. So the 23rd, beginning at 8 in the morning, bring your own lunch, and we'll have most everything else, except bring your roller frame. I have rollers, but bring the frame. Anyway, hopefully we can get that all done very quickly. Okay, has everyone bought their raffle ticket? Last chance. Raffle ticket? Raffle ticket? You need one? We have a raffle ticket sale over here, Mr. Wayne, to Mr. Wayne. Man, we're doing great. My goal was to fly through these announcements so we can allow as much time as possible for our program tonight. Since those of you that know Dan and Wayne, they are a wealth of knowledge, and we want to take advantage of their program tonight, which is buying used hand and power tools. I don't think I have any other announcements other than if you are doing show and tell tonight, again in an effort to keep everything moving, you've got the sign-in sheet that I'm going to take. I'm going to call your name as well as the next person. If you could kind of get in queue and be ready to go, we can get through show and tells in a timely manner. Okay, any other raffle ticket sales? Going, gone. Okay, raffle ticket sale is closed. I have one $50 gift card from Woodcraft and two $20 gift cards from Rockler. So, would you draw the first number? Someone.
Number 4672.
4672. I guess those are the last four digits. 4672. You gotta buy a ticket if you're gonna win. Okay. He took the $50 gift card. Yeah, duh.
4715.
4715. And we have a winner in the back. I'm getting the right or the left $20 gift card. Nope.
And 4687.
4687. Brian, okay. Ah, well, they told me to, okay.
Yeah, because when you're looking in there, all we see is that microphone.
Okay. All right. Let me grab the sheet. Got some sketch plans that he wants to share. Let you stand in front of this camera. Mark, we have got this down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't want to see. No offense, we don't want to see you.
Okay, so my name's Al. I've been leading the advanced sketch the last several weeks, and so I just wanted to come and show everybody kind of what we came up with.
Uh-oh. Hold for the next representative.
Might have forgotten this part.
Oh. We're getting better. Every meeting, we're getting a little better. So, Larry Alvarez is next.
Okay, so been leading the advanced SketchUp class, and what we're with is a nightstand that was designed by Bill Schucott, and together with the other members of the class, we took this and took a very nice, simple two-page provided, and we came up with a convoluted follow set of instructions. So got a few samples over here if you want to take a look at them, and then at the end of the night we'll put them in the library at the back so that if anybody wants to plans, you can feel welcome. Did you happen to have that video, David? A little video walkthrough of the thing here real quick. We're going to try and play. So when I was a kid, I used to love playing with Lego, and my mom thought she would give me the gift of creativity by throwing away all the instructions. And it didn't work. It just gave me something to talk about with my therapist later in life. But as a consequence, I can't make anything now without a really good set of instructions, so I'm kind of addicted to SketchUp. But in any case, this is a video that kind of just shows a little walkthrough thing. And if you're interested in learning how to do this, and you're a little bit savvy, and you need a good set of plans, you don't want to working off something off the back of a napkin, we're starting the beginner SketchUp class very soon, so check out the website for that. And we'd love to have you guys come out for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Okay, Larry's up. And then after Larry, I have Dave Gronenfeld for your tool chest, which looks great. Okay.
Okay. Larry Alvarez, and I'm trying to use up all the little pieces of wood I did over the years. I got probably almost a large trash can full of small pieces, and I've already started working on Christmas presents for this year. I decided for the women I'm going to make little, and for each of the families I'm going to make a little snowman holder. And I'm also making little Christmas ornaments out of little pieces of cut off 2x4. And I do need some help. I'm trying to figure out what I have for the men. I figured the women, but I haven't come up with anything for the men yet. So if anybody's got some suggestions, please let me know. Thank you. Shot glass. Hey, oh, okay.
Money.
Pardon?
Money clip.
Oh. Okay.
Who wears a tie? Who has money? Okay,
Okay.
belt buckle. All right, thank you. All right, David next, and then Eric Smith. You need some help lifting that?
Maybe.
Okay.
I'm David Gronenfeld, and I enrolled in the beginning woodworking class, and I brought the couple of projects that we made. We made two projects in the class. The first was a tool tote, which is right here. Okay, so, and I added a little saw carry tool tote, but that was, we did some dovetails on that and some dados, and did a lot of just basic woodworking fundamental skills. And then
Was that all with hand tools, Dave?
we prepped the wood, I think, with machines, and then we did most of the dovetails with hand tools, but we did prep it with the.
Leave it on the table. Thank you.
I will.
Looks great, Dave.
Thanks, Vicki.
Just lift it up.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
This
And
is
the
more of
second
a nightstand.
was a tool chest that doors and then a folding panel.
Yep.
Okay, that comes down, and so we made that. Again, we did most of the preparation with the machinery, but then we did hand dovetails on the drawer, and if correct mistakes is a sign of a good woodworker, I am becoming a very good woodworker.
You're an expert.
Yes, I'm not an expert, but I give myself many opportunities to improve in that regard.
That's fantastic.
So,
It's not a mistake, it's a deviation from plan.
It's a
Yes,
design
yes, it
element.
is.
We call it a
And-
design element.
and I'm glad I didn't have a SketchUp thing, 'cause that would have only created more problems for me, because I would have been trying to match the thing, and it came out to be whatever size it happened to be.
Yeah, we don't
So-
want to create anxiety on
That's right.
any of these.
And I made my hardware as well.
Oh, wow.
Ford's-
And what is the wood?
The wood is cherry,
Cherry, beautiful,
okay, from
beautiful. And we have another, is that all, David? And then Eric, you have one as well?
I do have a chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
but if-
Go ahead, do your chair.
And then, COVID project here. My dad has about 4.5 acres out by New Melly, and he had some damage and some trees were damaged, and he started getting nervous, so he started having some trees taken down. And so there was some very nice white oak and red oak laying on the ground out there, and I wanted to do something with it. And so I tried to saw it up, but then you have to dry it, and I decided to just go ahead and make something with green woodworking. So I made some post and run chairs, and this is number 15.
Oh,
This one's
good
15.
grief.
So I made a pair for my parents out of the wood, and I made a chair for each of my siblings, which there are 5 of us, well, 4 other siblings and myself. And then I've been making pairs of chairs for wedding gifts, so that
Very
I have a wedding gift now. I don't have to worry. I just make a bunch of someone's gonna
stack
marry.
'em up.
That's what they get. Okay.
Well, they will be most grateful, I'm sure.
This
Beautiful.
one happens to be out of. This one happens to be out of red oak, and this red oak was actually from a tree at Faust Park. So
And then you did the webbing as well on the seat?
I did do the webbing on the seat. It's shaker tape, and that really was, just weave it back and forth, front and back, and then just skip every one and put it through there.
Looks great. Very nice. And then Eric, you have a chest as well from the class, is that correct?
Yes. Yes, I
You want
also.
help holding it? Tom, can you help?
Yeah.
And what wood did you use?
So I also used cherry, but I guess a much younger tree or version because it's not as dark. And then I did brass hardware on there, just kind of keep it kind of classic. But yeah, same way with David. I learned I did a lot of mistakes, but you learn from them and adapted, and I think it turned out pretty nice for my.
I think it turned out gorgeous.
Take the fundamentals.
Yeah. So I took it with Wayne. So.
So now I know what mine should
Finished
look
that.
like should I ever finish mine.
Yeah.
Very nice of her.
But, I think that's a good plug to the fundamentals class. You learn not just basic skills, you can create some beautiful pieces. So Wayne, I think you've put together a great program. Obviously these guys indicated they've learned a lot and gave them a confidence to keep on going. So good job, you guys. All right, I have Keith Lassant, and then Brad. Stand on the mark.
I'm Keith Lassant, and made a model of an old-time steamroller. It's going to be a Christmas present for my great-nephew. It's largely pieces of scrap wood that I had around. I have a lot of walnut laying around. And this is walnut, there's maple, there's poplar, and a lot of the Baltic birch plywood for the wheels.
Very nice. Very nice. And then
I don't know for sure, several weeks, because you could do just a little bit at a time. Cutting the wheels, I have a circle cutter that has 2 blades on it that you can adjust so that you cut the inside and the outside circles at the same time.
Oh.
So that I glued the plywood together to get the thicknesses that I wanted, and then out at the shop with the drill press on a low speed, I was able to cut the inside and the outside for the rims of the wheels.
very nice. Very nice. Thanks. Thanks very much. Where'd you get the plan? We got the plan, he can include it in our newsletter. Okay, after Brad, Bill will talk about upcoming stuff.
Hi, good evening.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to apologize for my voice before I start. I've got some type of non-COVID
Well, use the microphone.
issue that's affecting my voice. So these two chairs that I brought in, do I need to be this close, Vicki, to this?
Yeah,
I feel like I'm right on top of this.
you're fine.
So these two chairs that I brought in are the end of a 5-year journey that I've been on to build to use Ron Clarkson's 2 books. This is the second book that contains a lot of the information for the 2 chairs that I brought in. The first book, about 5 years ago, I started and built a pie crust Chippendale. This would be second half of 18th century carved tilt-top table. And I started on these 2 chairs about 3 years ago, and a move got in my way. I had gotten the joinery done for the backs of these 2 chairs, and I put things on hold for almost 18 months, which I've spent rehabbing a house. So about 6 months ago, I got busy again with the joinery to finish the construction and carving on these. And I wanted just to share a little bit about the finish tonight, to be a little brief. I have built over the last 10 years a few different period pieces, and I started with using gel stains and using wiping varnishes, and I quickly switched over to shellac, and I have experimented with getting comfortable with shellac and putting it on, and especially in the application to these 2 chairs on a vertical surface, and be able to control the amount that I load on the brush and how quickly I brush it so as to not get runs. So these 2 chairs are made out of mahogany. Mahogany is this wood tone before I apply this antique style finish to it. And so it really requires quite a bit of work. As far as sanding goes, with something that's carved considerably, you generally don't want to sand much around or over the tops of the carved elements. The rest of the surfaces are 220 grit. I start off by using a trans-tint dye in wax shellac, and the shellac that I buy is the Zinsser Clear product. And I have found a recipe of red-brown trans-tint that I like. I put 3 coats of that on, and these coats dry fairly quickly. Within an hour or so, you can reapply. After 3 coats, I sand, and usually that's with 320. And then I go ahead and apply a coat of sealer, which doesn't have wax, sealer shellac, and then a glaze. And so the glaze, in my opinion, is what really makes this look somewhat similar to an aged antique. The glaze that I had tried on the pie crust table, which I had a hard time getting it to dry, was a artist's asphaltum color that they put drying retarders in. And you mix that with mineral spirits and put that on as a glaze, and the idea is that that settles around the carving and really gives it the look that dirt has built up, and this is an aged look to the finish. And so after taking about 2 months on the pie crust table to get that stuff to dry, I searched a little more and ended up with what I wanted for the first project I built, and that was a non-fibered asphalt product, a foundation coating, and that's what's in the can that I brought in here. That was mixed with mineral spirits and applied, and that took about a week this time to get that glaze to dry, and then that gets top coated with wax shellac dye added to it, about 3 coats, and one additional which is done, which I chose to do with wet dry sandpaper at 800 grit. Used minerals and mineral oil as a vehicle, and I'd never done that before either, and I found that to get a very nice finish to this. So really, in all of the application of the finish, there was the original sanding and then 2 additional sandings, and that really was the easiest that I've found to build this type. The last thing that which was done today, and it's not even fully dried, and I use this on my pie crust table as well, is this brie wax that's got a mahogany tint pigment added to it, and that goes on, and you buff it out, and that's the finish that you see. So the only thing left to do for this is get some seats upholstered and add that to it. And one other thing about transient versus like stain, the particles in trans tint, which you can put in your in shellac, you can put them as well, although that is something that is so small that it goes into the wood and of the wood much more so than you do when you use stains. And so as far as my experience goes, this process that I've used, which was a combination of my own mistakes that I've made and reading on the internet, really has given me the best result that I've had with any of the pieces that I've tried to reproduce to something that would appear like an antique. Wayne?
Did you get that look?
Well, last time when I gave up and I went to the art store, I looked in all the big box stores. I couldn't find it. I looked in a couple other places. This time I found this product, believe it or not, Walmart online. They do not have it in the stores, but the non-fibered product, and I have so much here. For both of these chairs, I used 1 tablespoon, probably, you know, maybe the equivalent of about 4 tablespoons of mineral spirits. So that stuff goes a long way. It takes a while for that to dissolve, but I have enough here that I could probably give an amount to use for the rest of your lives. So I'm offering it if somebody wants some. Just bring a container next time.
Yeah, I'll give you a call. I need
Sure.
to your new shop anyway.
But I tell you that I'd read that on some blogs that some of the old time guys use this as a glaze. And in my opinion, the glaze is really what makes the piece pop and look old, because you reproduce something that looks like it's been sitting around for quite a while, accumulating dirt and grime.
Well, that asphaltum is used for Japan. You know, that's the black that you see on Stanley planes and whatnot. That's the basic.
Yeah.
And finding it non-fibered is really difficult.
So you've tried as well.
Yeah. It's not hard.
Yeah, and like I said, I gave you before. The other thing I want to point out, and then I'll stop here, is the carving on both of these chairs are different. There's different elements, and on the one that's to your right, my left, that has a lion's paw on it, which actually was the most detailed instruction of any in the Clarkson book. And it's a very interesting. Am I making trouble, Vicki, moving away from the microphone?
No, just to let everyone see the detail. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I just point that out because it would have been very unusual in the 18th century here for more than just a very small number of people to have a lion's paw on even a high style Chippendale chair. That was way more common over in Europe. But it was very interesting to carve, and I had never carved one before, so this is of two in my carving experience. Very happy with the way it turned out. You really can't sand a feature like that at all, so there's been no sandpaper applied to that. The ball and claw foot, you can sand those or scrape them. This is about the 10th ball and claw foot that I've done, and you definitely, you know, there is a learning curve to doing this. The style of carving would be low relief, where you're bringing all the background down and you're making your featured patterns stand out, usually about 1/8 of an inch. So, any other questions? Yeah. How much time?
How much time for the
Just
whole
for the
leg? The carving?
You know,
and-
you're asking the kind of questions I usually ask, and I always got vague answers, and it really is hard to answer. I would say if I was in a roll, I'd carve that ball and claw in, I mean, if you know, probably 8 hours or
Now,
something.
this is after he's done a whole lot of
Yeah,
them.
if I'd done several in a row, I probably could carve it that quick. Stuff like this, I fretted about, and you know, these patterns are copied on here. I had a full-size pattern sheet, and I used carbon paper, or the old black, if that's what it's called, that a lot of us older guys used when we were in school. And I actually drew this on, and that's how the elements were carved. Same thing somewhat on the knees and of the cabriolet adornments. And I'd done a few of those before as well, and I have a lot of tools to do this. So I'm, you know, it definitely is a growth experience to figure out how to do this. And I did make an that I have covered up as well, which would be an interesting thing to talk about in the future.
Another
what you
time.
can do, not tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. As always, Brad, you do such beautiful. Did we have one more show and tell that didn't sign in? No? No? Okay. So, Bill, why don't you talk about what we have upcoming?
The presentations and classes are shown in the newsletter, and you can sign up for classes going to the website. What I want to talk about that's a little unusual is on August 21, we're going to have 2 shop tours, one with John Bronson and one with Joe Turner. I don't know if Joe's here tonight. So sign up for those if you're interested. That should be very interesting.
Both in the same day.
Both the same day.
What was that date again?
The 21st.
August 21st. Yeah, on the website and in the newsletter. Okay?
And then the one other thing I do want to mention is the new fundamentals class is starting August 22nd. That's available to sign up. There are 12 spots available in that class, and at this point we have 5 people signed up. So there's plenty of space if you're interested.
Yeah, and you saw some of the finished products from that class, and I truly highly recommend it as well.
Even if you didn't finish your
Even if you
test.
haven't finished, you do learn.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, dang, I love it when we're right on time. So next up, we have our actual tonight's program with Dan Coleman and Wayne Watson, going to share their knowledge on buying used hand and power tools. So gentlemen, if you'd come up, the floor is yours.
Will I get a red mark? Anywhere behind the blue line. Good evening.
I'm going to start off, and I'm going to go pretty quickly. First slide. Do I get a clicker or something, or I just tell you to move the slides? I do get a clicker. They trust me. There's 4 buttons on here. Which one do I use? I'm going to start off with hand tools. This is not the one that works. Okay. This is not a hand tool. There we go. Now, which hand tools am I going to be talking about? The stuff that you're going to find commonly. Yeah, every one of you wants to fill your shop up with hand tools. And quite frankly, most of the hand tools that you buy today, unless you go big bucks, Lee Nelson, etc., they're just substandard. For example, unless you spend $350 on a saw, you're not going to get a saw with the same quality as one like this that came out of the 50s. You go into your local big box store, heck, even if you go into Rockler or Woodcraft, you're not going to find a saw with the quality of this one right here, this back saw. Now, you can buy these saws new. Lee Nelson sells them for about $250. Bad Axe Tool, $300. Go to Rob Cosman, $3 1/4, $350. But there's a lot of these things out there. Braces. Most people don't even know what a brace is, but that's what you call a drill. And you put a bit in. So, hand planes. Everybody wants hand planes. Shaves, draw knives. All these things are available new, but you're going to pay premium prices. But if you're careful, watch your sales, go on to flea markets, etc. All these tools are available. First thing you need to do when you're looking for tools, you need to figure out whether it's worth buying. And condition is everything. I'm going to pass this around. And I'm going to ask a question at the end. I'm going to throw it. Can I throw it at Pete? Apparently not. So, rules. And I'm not going to pass these around because it took me a long time to find them. But anybody, after the end of the presentation, you can come up and take a look at it. These are 2 Starrett rules. Starrett is a machine company, or they still in business up in Massachusetts. Make excellent tools, and you can find these in estate sales, etc. You want to make sure that they're straight and level, and they can see me. Why am I up here? There we go. They what? We have about 15 people watching online that want to see you too. Tell them if they want to see me, they can come to the meeting. Squares. And I grab the ones that I use the most frequently. And this is probably my favorite tool in the shop, a little 6-inch stack combination square. But when you buy these things, of course, Starrett's are pretty bulletproof. But you want to make sure that the blade is clean, no pitting. Pitting is bad news. If the tool's got pitting, there's nothing you can do for it. Surface rust, you can clean. But you want to make sure the square is in fact square. Combination squares, I don't know of any way to square them up. It's not like a framing square where if it gets out a little bit, you can punch it with a punch with that metal, but I don't think these are flexible. I may be wrong. Chisels. I don't know what it is with chisels, but chisels are really, really hard to find. And when you do find them, they're expensive. And this is the kind of tool that I'm talking about. This is a socket chisel patterned off of Stanley 730s. And they're perfect, are very well suited for, furniture building. But most of the time what you're going to find is something like this. Okay, now I buy these and I hang them in a prominent place, so when my wife is looking for something to open a paint can, she goes for these and not my good Lee Nelson chisels. That's about all they're good for. These are carpenter's chisels. Steel's not as good, they won't hold an edge as long, and so forth. Saws. How many of you have actually used a saw? Oh, you're lying. Lying.
I used one 2 weeks ago.
Lying. Okay. So, again, these are plentiful. And the steel in these is so good that usually they don't pit at all. You'll see a lot of surface rust, and you get in there and you can clean that up. This one was cleaned up. And you see that black stuff on there? That used to be rust. And then, of course, you got to join them and sharpen them. And then you have an excellent tool. This one's kind of interesting. It's, I collect antique tools. And this back saw, it's a good back saw, but it came from England in about 1820, which was after the War of 1812. And U.S. buyers weren't real high on English stuff. So what they did is they put the medallion with George Washington's profile on it. A little marketing there. Cool. Hand planes. Everybody wants hand planes. So I brought two. One is a Stanley, and the collectors get nuts on what type they are and whatever. And then I brought a no-name plane. And I'm going to leave it up here. At the end of the presentation, I ask you to come up and take a look, and you'll see the difference in quality. And these planes are plentiful. I mean, they're just everywhere. Eric loaned me this. Eric's been caught by the bug. He's now buying planes by the box full. So, and he picked up a pretty nice plow plane, but it needs some work, and he's aware of that. But the kind of things you're looking for, these are impossible to repair. You want to make sure that the knobs, the adjustment knobs, move freely. In this case, he's going to have to replace the screw holding the fence on, but this is easily cleaned up. The bad news is these plow irons, they usually come in a set, and it's rare if you find a set with a plane. And if you do, some collector snatches it up. So, and that's your worst enemy, the collectors. Guys like Ethan Cox. Where is he? Ethan, where are you? Oh, you didn't show up. No more collecting, Ethan. We're after you. I can't emphasize enough how the condition really makes a difference. I can't tell you how many times somebody's brought to me a hand plane. It's got a big crack in it, or the mouth is all busted out. Unless you're buying it for parts, don't mess with it, because there's enough of them out there. I mean, Stanley made these by the thousands. They cranked these things out faster than Ford cranked out Model Ts. They're just everywhere. So. The Stanley planes, sometimes they're marked Bailey, Craftsman, Record, Miller Falls, Winchester, all high quality planes. Then you get into things like Shelton and Dunlop, whatever, and these are built to maintain a price point someplace. So, where do you go to look? The best place is estate sales. You can actually get out there, you can look at the thing, you can inspect it, and usually estate sales, the prices are pretty reasonable. The problem is there are 15 woodworkers in front of you. So what you got to do is figure out a way to get in front of them, or carry a gun or something, I don't know. The other problem is the estate sales are not all that frequent. So I think the last estate sale that I had was what we did, Kurt Herman. And that was nice for our members because they got a preview and were able to buy ahead of time. But they come far and few in between. Craigslist and Facebook. I've just recently started looking on Facebook Marketplace. And like Craigslist, prices seem to be getting crazy. I think they go on to eBay and they see what the collectors are paying, and they say, well, I got this plane that in reality is worth $25, but I'm going to put $100 on it. And if you try to tell them that they're kind of out of line, they're insulted. So. I drive Dan crazy because wherever we go someplace, I see a flea or an antique shop, I want to go in there. In reality, it's very rare that you find decent priced tools in antique shops. Once in a while, there's a couple antique shops around that have good tools. I ain't telling you where they're at because they give away the secret. Now, there's one in Pocahontas, Illinois, and there's another one, Apple Wagon or something, that off of 70, going east. Dan drives Dan crazy because there's no bandsaws in these flea markets or these antique shops. So he says, you know, he follows me around like my wife. You know, can we leave now? The pricing, like I said, is just sometimes it's really insane in those tool dealers. This weekend, Mike Ernest, Great Plains Trading, is having an auction in St. Peter's. And you can go online, just look up Great Plains Trading. It's got all kinds of, primarily hand planes. And this particular auction is big on keen cutter stuff. So there's going to be a lot of collectors in there, but there might be a few things in there that you're looking for. The tool dealers, they come up with the best selections of stuff. Guys like Jim Bodie, but you're going to pay because what they're selling is aimed towards the collector. They usually have excellent descriptions, but their costs are going to be really, really high. eBay, I can't remember the last time I bought something off of eBay because eBay prices, they've just gotten insane, absolutely insane. It used to be fun when there was an actual auction going on. Now they just put them up for crazy money. You know, I want X number of dollars for this. But on the other side, there's a large selection. So if you're looking for something specific, the odds are it may be on eBay if you're willing to pay the money. And on top of that, you got to pay a big freight cost. Shipping costs sometimes can be as much as the tool cost. And again, a lot of competition, especially for the rarer stuff. And here's a couple of websites that you can go to. Midwest Tool Collectors is primarily collecting hand planes. Early American Industries Association, they deal with all kinds of tools. Everything from corn shuckers to hand planes. So, Jim Bodie Tools, supertool.com. he comes out with a list of tools once a month. I've never had much luck buying from him because by the time I bid on it, somebody's already bought it. So that's about it. Has everybody seen this thing? Quick question. How many people think you can make this thing work? You're right. It looks ugly, but there's no pitting. It's all surface rust. There's a little bit of pitting when you come back a little bit, but you could probably get, you know, quite a bit of life out of that. So you know, look at these things closely and carefully. So. Any questions on what I had to say? Dan, you're up.
Wayne, one thing about those hand saws, if you get one that's no longer usable as a saw, the steel makes an excellent scraper.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. You can cut that steel and use it for a scraper. But scrapers aren't expensive.
Well, that's true, but
So,
if you're in a pinch.
yeah. If you go to Ron Bont's, he'll give you all the steel you want.
Yeah, he has extras. Okay. Okay, we're at power tools, a pretty good list, but we're going to try to go through it pretty quick. And then if there's questions, we're going to have some time at the end, hopefully. And I'll probably cut some of this out as we go. Okay, let's go backwards. Hand tools, I mean, it's according to what you're doing in your shop as to how much you're going to buy yourself or whether you're just going to borrow something or you're going to go out to the shop, use it. But the basics that if you're going to do much of anything, at least circular saws, you need to rough down plywood or something large or rough stuff up before you take it in the shop or the house. You need something to saw it up with. A drill or two, you know, according to how much you like to change drill bits. Same thing with routers. I mean, you get by with one router. I'm embarrassed to tell you how many I have, and I've sold some lately. At one time, I had 24 and 23 of them worked, and I went down to my buddy's house, and I'll be darned if he didn't have a great big old newer model of the old one that I had broken, and before I left, it was the 24th one was working. Saber saw if you're going to do some curves, but and those are just conditioned. Like I say, estate sales, garage sales, for most of us, we're not using it every day. Go to the big box store or something. I've got my grandfather's saw at home that I still use. I mean, hell, I built my house and didn't wear it out. But I've also got a super saw cat that I'm going to rebuild here pretty soon, which is pretty nice. Stationary tools, what do you have room for? And what are you going to do? I mean, there's the list right there, and I'm sure that somebody could add something to that. But table saw, bandsaw, joiner, a radial arm saw might fit in there somewhere. Joiner, yeah, drill press or two. Sanders, you know, we got along real well without a sander for a long time. Scroll saw, I've got one that's 40 years old, sits up on a shelf. Get it down, use it whenever I need it. And a miter saw, and I use my miter saw and bandsaw more than anything else on that list, probably. Okay. Basic checklist, when you go to garage sale, estate sale, or you answer an ad on Craigslist or Marketplace, first of all, how much room do you have? And what are you going to do with the saw or tool once you get it? Is it size appropriate and the quality level appropriate? You know, unisaws are becoming available now. Well, this was the go-to saw in all the schools. I found one for my friend, matter of fact, he joined last month, Tim, $125 for a unisaw stuck back in the back of his two-car garage. You know, and he got there at 1 o'clock. They dropped another 25% off of it. He gave $112.50 for a unisaw. You know, unheard of. But it's the same saw they made in 1937. His is a 53. If you bought one in 1997, it'd be the same saw. You could buy parts for it. You know, Delta's basically defunct for the most part, but you can find parts for them. Not from a dealer, but you can find them online. Okay, voltage appropriate. 3-phase now, you can buy a VFD, and if you've got 220 in your garage, or even 110 if you're only running like a half horsepower, you can use a 3-phase machine now at home if you want to spend $150 for a variable frequency drive. And the best thing with that, like if you got a wood lathe with belts, put it in the middle belt, use the VFD, and you got slow speed to high speed, you got braking, you can even turn it in reverse with that little magic box. So that opens up a whole new deal where 3-phase machines basically went to the trash in the past. You know, and so many schools have discontinued industrial arts, and they're having these auctions all the time getting rid of stuff. It's kind of turned around, but all the old stuff's still out there. What's the overall appearance? To me, if it's not dented up, it's good. I don't paint. Okay, you can clean it up with 409, WD-40, goop works real good for cleaning off the paint finishes. My buddy did a radial arm saw that had this textured finish on it, you know, one of the old DeWalt's. That thing looked beautiful when he got done. He only spent 3 hours on it, and it looked like a new saw. And he used goop. Does it run? You know, if it's something with brushes or switches and cord, you might take your chance. You know, I took my chance on a router, gave $30 for it. It's a $150 router. You know, it took the, on that one, I thought it was probably the cord because it was kind of crappy, but it was one of these with soft start. Well, the soft start was bad. Well, I take that out, wire around it, put it back together again. You got a horse of a router. I mean, you can't hardly hold on to the darn thing, really. So is it solid? You know, is it wore out? I mean, you can tell. Shake it around, pull the parts, whatever it is you're working on it. Any of the tools off that list. Wobble it, the bearings shot. Are all the parts there? That's a problem sometimes. You know, a dust door missing from a unit I saw, that don't bother me at all. Take a piece of cardboard on it and use the darn thing. Stick a vacuum hose in it. But if you're missing something like you can't tilt it, the blade, or you can't hold it where it's supposed to be on a tilt, then that's an issue. Okay, so and broken parts. You know, when we talk about table saws, we'll talk about some of that. Is the brand, does it still exist? And that's kind of a double-edged sword. Yeah, it could exist, but they have just terrible service. You know, not everybody's got service department that Grizzly has. Some of them can't tell you anything when you do call them. And then you got people like Delta, yeah, they're there by name only, basically. Nothing, they're not even a shadow of the company they were 15, 20 years ago. So they're useless if it's not an old standby machine. So that's an important part. eBay helps on this. And then you have groups like OWWM, they help also. And those guys are a wealth of knowledge. It's just unreal. And you've got electricians and machinists in that doing this rebuilding and salvaging old machines, so they can tell you anything about anything. Extras, is there a mobile base included? You know, mobile base, if you got to have your tools mobile, that's $50 minimum. If you buy a machine and you got to add a base to it, okay, then are the repairs within your skill set? You go to YouTube and learn an awful lot, or you can call some friends, you can call me, and we can fix a lot of stuff. But if it's something, you know, I don't grind shafts. I can turn you a shaft, but I can't grind the darn thing. You know, that would be beyond my skill set. So, and your skill set's going to be different than mine. Okay, expected, you're going to have to clean up anything, and you're going to have to lube it, tune it up a little bit. Probably going to need a new cord if it's a power tool, you know, or a handheld power tool. A belt. The belts get old and cracked. The belts get a set in them. The darn thing's not being used, and they wrapped them around small pulleys to begin with on this woodworking equipment because you want high speed. They get a set in them, and they thump like the dickens, and your whole tool vibrates. spend $10, buy a new belt. And if you buy a cogged belt, because they'll go around a smaller pulley easier and won't get a set in them. You're going to replace some bolts that are missing here and there. Try not to break anything off that you can't get back out with an easy out. Bearings. The saw may look perfectly new. It may look like it was just put away. Like the bandsaw that we bought that was 1978, new in the box. I'll have to replace all 4 bearings in that saw because the lubricant drains out and all you end up with is paraffin. Now you can beat that a little bit, run it, stop it, warm it up, stop it, and you might get by for a while without changing the bearings. Bearings are cheap. They're expensive at the hardware store, but you go to the bearing house and they'll sell them to you cheap. Take your bearing with you, they'll match it up. I use a place out of Chicago. It's called Accurate Bearing, and the OWWM guys have a gal there that we go to, and we buy for a fourth of the price of the hardware store. $12 bearing in the hardware store costs me about $4 or $5. So, that's getting them pressed off the shafts the hardest part. Pulleys. Check the pulleys and see if they wobble. Okay, see if they've been waddled out because the set screw came loose. And you're going to have to replace it. Pot metal pulleys, if they're big in diameter, they may wobble, and you'll have to replace them. There's places online you can buy pulleys pretty cheap. Can't think of the name of the place, but it's kind of the go-to place. Rust removal. Buy a good scraper you put single edge razor blades in. So all that surface rust that Wayne was talking about, you take it, every bit of it off with a razor blade. Then you get down on, after that, you might use a little bit of wet dry paper or Scotch-Brite on it. Finish it up with Bow Shield, or I use paste wax and a heat gun. That seals that top up again on a table saw or on a shaft, on a drill press. Nobody takes care of a drill press column. They all look like crap. But it's just elbow grease, guys. Start out with some 220 grit sandpaper and the belt, and just like polishing shoes, working back and forth. It's just elbow grease, and then finish it up with something to keep it nice. So if you're really into something looking really nice, there's some really good looking rebuilds with beautiful paint jobs and stuff online. But like I say, I want the darn thing to run. And I don't get too terribly upset about a little bit of dull paint. Table saws, arbor and motor bearings, elevation and tilt mechanisms. Make sure they work as far as functioning. Can't have any missing teeth because then you're going to have a hard time getting that blade where you want it. And if it's not one with a lock in the middle, like a unisaw would have, or a saw stop or a Powermatic, it's not going to stay there on its own with just friction if it's missing teeth. If you're only going to use it for ripping or cross-cutting, never going to tilt it, I guess tilt doesn't make any difference. The old saw that we had out there originally at the shop, well, that motor was so enormous you couldn't tilt the thing. You just weren't going to. Kind of felt sorry for the guy that bought it from us, actually. Make sure the fence aligns. You can play with fences and adjust them. Sometimes they may be missing a little pad on the inside or something like that. But as long as a fence locks down in the front first and the back second, if it's cammed inside, it'll be repeatable. Because you always want to just always work from the right, bumping it. It'll repeat every time. Now, if you work from the right and left both, it won't repeat. But if the fence locks down as it should, then it's a go. Miter gauge and guard included. Everybody now, I still use miter gauge because that's why I learned, and I got hands the size of 3 people. So miter gauge is pretty easy for me. But most people now just use the box thing and build one of those, actually put a guard on it sometimes. Guard included. The only thing missing from the saw that Tim got last week was the original guard, which would include a splitter. Extra blades and attachments, they add up. Most everybody uses carbide now. And the old blades just go to waste unless you want to just butcher up some wood or something and don't want to ruin your good carbides. Or like we chopped up one the other day, we're making a new splitter for Wayne, and I wanted good steel. I used a saw blade for it. Guards, you got guys, don't use a joiner without a guard. The carpenter I used when I lived in Molnette, he had trimmed the bottom off his finger. This was an old man, and it was so old that when they scratched his neck up and they stitched it to his neck for 3 weeks, and then they cut it off and stitched his neck up. You know, I mean, they wouldn't do that now. They'd harvest some skin from your leg probably, but even if you have to make a wooden guard, stick a bolt through it and stick it in the hole. Use a guard. You come up with some kind of a spring mechanism, use a guard. If it's not included, it's worth half the price, even if, because you're going to go home and spend 3 hours trying to make a guard. Elevation has to work, whether it's the angled kind of adjustment or a parallel, where they got the 4 little parallels on each table. I'm sold on the one with the 2 angles. When those are built, they're locked down tight, and both of those are planed and ground on the same machine at one time. In the old days, when they aged castings, you could bet on it that thing was going to stay flat for the next 300 years. The way they're made now, these castings come off, they get cooled down, they get cleaned up, they get a rough machining, and then they get a little bit of a final machining, and it may even be done with them all locked together, but those castings have not aged, and castings will move. So now, if you want to buy especially an 8 or 10 or 12 inch joiner, I'd be tempted to go like the one we have at the shop, or like Wayne has, where it's the parallel, because you can adjust those. And you can actually bend that cast iron just a smidgen and get them back all cold planar. But that's, on the used market, all you're going to find is a wedge bed type, probably. And I use my 4-inch as much as I do my 6. Maybe I actually use it more. And and it's very old. And it was actually a together piece of equipment. Good story behind that. Make sure that it has an adjustable outfeed table. No offense to the old Craftsmans that were built like tanks, but if you buy one where the outfeed table is not adjustable, you're going to hate yourself every time you have to put knives in it, because you like to be able to have that table low when you put the knife in and then raise it up to get it just perfect to where it's cutting right. Well, if it's not adjustable, the only thing you can adjust is the bearing post, maybe, on each side. You're probably going to just end up just putting them in, and you're going to get about 5/1000ths of an inch sticking out above the table, and you're going to live with that. And when it gets dull, you're going to have to change it, go through the whole thing again, because you won't be able to hone it and raise the outfeed table. So make sure you buy one with an outfeed table that's adjustable. Table condition and alignment, like say, it needs to be able to move. Fence condition needs to be straight, but it's not a deal breaker if it's not straight, because you can always you can laminate a piece of wood to it, and you can run it across the joiner and make it flat where it doesn't have a twist or a cup or a bow in it anymore. So that's not a deal breaker. It just cuts down on how wide you've got to use after you get done. Whether it's a gib type head, with straight knives, or whether you've got inserts, or there are some that have a knife that is skewed. I would stay away from that, because it's going to be hard to find a set of knives for it, and hard to put back in when you have to do it. And look at the bolt heads. If those bolt heads are rounded off, that's, to me, almost a deal breaker, because you cannot buy those gib bolts if it's a Delta. I know for sure, and I think Paramedic uses the same darn thing. There's a company that makes a batch of them about once every other year, Lenovo online, and when he doesn't have them, you can't find them. So you have to find somebody that's switched over to a inserted head. You buy a whole head just to buy a bolt or two, you know. And they've got to all be alike, because that thing's spinning at 4,000 or 5,000 RPM, and 6 or 8 grams of weight difference times a couple bolts, and they're all, I mean, that's going to get a vibration sooner or later. Yeah. 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 Yeah, they usually have a goofy head on them. You know, and the head's just got just a little bit of a dome to it. It may be square and it may be hex. I know that when I go to change them, I use good wrenches that are guaranteed, because they're usually 5/16 or 3/8, and you're going to spring them, so you just take them back to Sears or you give them back to the proto guy and you exchange them, tell them that they're ruined. You know, otherwise, I mean, you get them. I've taken them apart before where I've run 3 or 4 good wrenches, you know, before I ever got them apart. Oops. Okay, then see if they've got extra knives included, and not ones that are wore out, but you know, and they all have to be about the same weight. So you don't want a mix match of different widths. Bandsaws, tilt mechanisms, and it should work in the tension mechanism. And the part I couldn't remember last month was the fulcrum. That's the part on the top of the bandsaw. The fulcrum is the axle that goes through, and then the axle for the upper wheel, that gets bent. Okay, on a Delta, there's a guy in Midwest I buy mine from, and they cost $35. You know, if you buy, well, no, that's the tension mechanism and all, but Grizzly has and I don't know if they'll interchange with a Delta or a Powermatic, but theirs are made heavier, and but they're made just a little different where the pin and the axle is. So I've not tried interchanging those, but they're cheap there. They're like probably $12, $13. We replaced one of them that was donated to the Guild long ago that's now out at the Transportation Museum. I just replaced that whole mechanism because it was didn't know if it was metric or if it was imperial. So to avoid the mess, just bought the whole mechanism. Grizzly probably didn't even cost us $40 for all of it. Well, the blades, if the parts underneath are broken, they're aluminum usually, those are all pretty interchangeable. I've put Grizzly on Delta. Delta is the same as Powermatic. So on the little 14-inch saws. Now you get bigger, you know, you're kind of on your own there, maybe harder to get. Look at the wheels. Do they wobble? You may have to replace some bearings. Okay, but do the wheels wobble real bad? Especially if you plan on just using urethane tires on them without gluing on rubber and crowning them. That's a deal breaker. Wheels can get expensive. If you're going to glue rubber wheels on, rubber tires that are thicker, then you mount them and you sand those to where they have just a little bit of an arch in them, and you can take out all that wobble. You know, it may not look straight, but the center of that crown will be straight, and that's all you worry about is the center of that crown. But that's extra work and some more skill involved. So that's what you'll have to do to get the blade to track. Guide blocks and bearings as all the parts there. Now, a bottom one on a small saw, I would get too concerned about not having bottom guides for a small bandsaw. Europe, they don't even worry about bottom guides. They just have tops. And I wouldn't worry about it if it didn't have bearings for guides. I use steel blocks on both of mine. I'm perfectly happy with them. Bob Vaughn, well-known writer for fine woodworking in the past, he still swears by steel blocks. You know, and then you can recondition them. They don't have to be hard. The ones at the shop out here I did Tuesday, they're soft. Just go to the disc sander, square them back up, knock off the corners, put them back in. You know, so they're quickly reconditioned. If you use the ones with bearings, if it's the small saws, they use the same bearings as skateboards, a 608 bearing. Buy a gross of them. They're going to go bad because they're going to get clogged with sawdust because the seals aren't any good before you wear out the ball bearings. So just buy half a gross online, so you just replace them all the time. It's a 6200 bearing for the back. Buy you about 4 of them. That'll last you 10 years. You know, so they're cheap. Pulleys, multiple or single speed. Hey, Harbor Freight sells a 14-inch bandsaw that you can buy it with a jack shaft on it. You can slow it down enough to cut aluminum. Or you can speed it up to 3,000 feet per minute and cut wood. And they're all patterned after the Delta saw. The only thing that's different is the guide blocks. And they are cheap and hard to work with. You know, you'll want to go buy metric thumb screws to put on them. There's a riser block included. You got to kind of think about that if you're wanting to do a little bit of, very little bit of resawing, because you don't have the power. The motor's not going to be big enough with a 1/2 or 3/4 horsepower motor on it. But if riser block's included, that's a plus, even if you want to turn around and sell it. You know, a Delta riser block kit, you can sell that for $150, $175 pretty easy because they're not available anymore. There's a guy that sells one that's been re-drilled, and you tell him what post you have. By the time it gets to your house, it's $300 off of eBay or online. I re-drilled Grizzlies and put them on the Delta saws. Okay, so but if I buy one for myself, and it's got a riser block on it, I take the darn thing off and sell it, recoup part of my income, my expenditure. Drill presses, arbors, chuck condition. Chuck's cheap for the most part. Most of the 15-inch, 14-inch, they use a Jacobs 33. A Harbor Freight sells them. You go buy 3 of them. You test all 3 of them. You take back the 2 that aren't any good. You know. Oh, and as long as the spindle's not bent, you know. Now, if the spindle's bent, that's a deal breaker. You know, if it wobbles very much, it's a deal breaker. You can have variable speed pulleys, or what the old Reeves drive. You know, you turn the crank and one opens up, one closes, goes faster, goes slower. Make sure that thing works. And make sure if it's an aluminum one, it works. You really want one that's cast iron if you're going to Reeves drive. Or a multi-step. If you want a multiple step, I wouldn't buy one that just had 2-step pulleys. Get one that has 3. You can get the darn thing slow enough to drill a hole in a piece of metal. Otherwise, it's strictly a woodworking drill press. You can't get them slow enough. Does it have an elevation crank on it? That's a nice thing. You know, none of us are getting any younger. If it doesn't, that's not a deal breaker. You can use a trailer tongue jack, flipped upside down, take the wheel off of it, make you a couple brackets, and you raise it and lower it. You're never going to raise the thing more than about 5 or 6 inches. So if it's a floor model, you got plenty of room to put that jack on there, you know, and it works great. Or you can put window weights down the shaft, the column, make you a little pulley mechanism, tie onto the table, and that takes away most of it to where you can raise and lower 10 pounds instead of 30 pounds. You know, I've done both on my Craftsman drill press. I did the window weight thing for a while, and now I've got a trailer jack on it. You know, and it works great. $20. Belt and disc sanders, spindle sanders. Will a belt tension or track? On a belt sander, if it won't track, that's a deal breaker. And before you buy it from the guy, make him show you that it will track. You know, if he says, "Oh, I don't have any belts," well, then that price just got cut in half because you can't convince me it'll track. You know, you can donkey with them if the mechanism is good, and you can even fake it out a little bit if it's lost some of the crown in that top wheel. You can put duct tape under there to make a crown, fake it out. But that won't last. Okay, so if the belt will tension and it'll track, that's good. If it won't, that's a deal breaker. The upper wheels, both of them need to have just a smidgen of crown and put a straight edge on it, should rock. The belts will always go to the crown. You can put a 4-inch belt on a 6-inch sander and it'll walk to the crown right in the middle of those two wheels. If the table's not worn, and this is more of a safety issue, if the belt's flopped around and there's a gap more than about 1/8 of an inch between that belt and that table, or the disc and the table, that's a finger trap. And you won't like the results. Okay, I've got into a drum sander, using it on the lathe, and it ate through my thumbnail in just a heartbeat, and it's painful. You can feel your heartbeat in it when it's once the adrenaline stops. It's just not fun. But if the table's worn much and you can't do something with it, you know, if you're a welder, I mean, you can do something with it, maybe. You can braze it back up. It's cast iron, or if it's aluminum. Tilting tables. I have tables because if it's a belt and a disc, you'd like to have a table on each one. You can find a table sometimes. You know, I pick them up at yard sales. It may not match the brand, and you may have to turn the little mounting rod, but especially if it's a Craftsman or something like that, you know, they mount on rods, single rods. If it's a Delta or Powermatic or some bigger piece of equipment, then you've got a whole tilting mechanism, and it would get expensive and hard to find an extra table for that. But you just don't want to be going back and forth with, I mean, every time you want a darn disc sander, it's going to be on the belt side. Everyone who wants the belt, it's going to be on the disc side. Not fun. Make sure the disc or the spindles don't wobble. You know, a disc sander that wobbles, you're never going to get you're going to set it with your square, and it's never going to give you a square cut. And it's going to vary every time by width even. So that if it wobbles, that's a deal breaker. Rubber spindles or sleeves or table inserts. You can buy spindles and sleeves online. You know, I bought them for the one I have. They just have a 1/2 inch or 13 millimeter hole in the middle. Table inserts, they don't have to be metal. They can be tempered hardboard, you know, masonite, probably, if it's the right thickness. If not, just make them the right thickness. You know, plane them down a little bit. Can you use dust collection with it? I've got 2 Craftsman belt and disc sanders. The one in the basement, which is really a good machine, tracks perfect, and it's identical to the one upstairs except it's missing 2 screw holes, and there's not enough room in the air casting to put 2 screw holes to put the dust collection. I don't care about the dust collection in the garage, but my wife would probably like to have better dust collection in the basement. You know, so if dust collection's an issue for you, make sure the plastic parts are there, the metal parts are there, or you can make something. I mean, there's a lot of creativity online for making dust collection stuff for sanders. Thickness planers, size and type appropriate. Most of us do not have the room, electricity, or the need for a 20-inch Powermatic. You know, but most of us would not really be very happy with a 12-inch lunchbox sander either. So what can you afford? What's your need? How far are you away from the shop to where you can maybe run out there and use the 15-incher? Are you going to work with curly wood? Then you want one probably bite the bullet and get one with a carbide head, insert head, so that it works well. Make sure all the elevation cranks, it functions, everything. Look at it closely, because it may just be simply a set screw broke loose. You know, we were offered a really nice planer years ago, and a bolt had come out of one of the 4 gears that raises and lowers on the 4 corners of the table. That's all it was. And after we had it loaded up in Wayne's truck, the guy says, "Here, this is what I found on the floor." So once I got it back home and in the garage, I was waiting for him to go to lunch, and 15 minutes, I had it fixed, and he was giving it away. Feed rollers, make sure they work. Some of these are going to have rubber feed rollers, and they're going to be all cracked and cruddy, and that's a deal breaker. You probably can't. Any of this modern stuff, you're not going to be able to find parts for it if it's maybe only just 5 years old. 10 years old is a total crapshoot. You can't find parts for that. They just don't. You go to e-replacement parts. If they don't have it, it's not out there, unless you want to do like I've done with some of our tools at the shop. Get online, and like I found the left-handed nut for the spindle sander in Colorado. A guy had 2 of them, and scroll saw parts from a guy in New York City. But I had to join 3 scroll sawing forums before I could find somebody that had one. And just check the knife and head condition. Here again, the gib bolts could be an issue. You can always go to Fastenal or something, and if you got somebody with a metal lathe can reshape that head for you, you'd probably be okay. But unless you plan on replacing a bunch of them, that could be an issue too. Scroll saw, spring-loaded head versus a walking beam head. The ones at the shop are, the Delta is a C-shaped pivoting head. If you go to Hegner or something, it's 2 arms, and they pivot together. There's about twice as much out in front as there is in the back, but they pivot together. The spring is in the back. The old style scroll saws, the spring is in the head in a tube, and there's lots of opportunity there, first of all, for it to wear out. Lots of opportunity for that spring to get bad, and a whole lot of opportunity for you just not being able to adjust it correctly. And you're going to break 3 or 4 blades before you ever get it adjusted correctly, and then it may not hold. So I'm not a fan of the old tube type heads. Any of what I'd consider a walking beam or the solid C, that's the way to go. With the walking beam, the blade stays just within thousandths of an inch of being perfect up and down all the way. The C-shaped ones, it gets a little bit of a rocking to it, but it also cuts pretty nice and aggressive because of that. So either one, that would be my choice. I wouldn't get the tube type. They're going to be old. You get an old Boyce crane, it's just like having another bandsaw. You can put a 1/2-inch blade in the thing. If you can learn how to adjust it, you'll never wear it out. But those are far and few between. Variable speed versus single speed. I have to put a vari-arc on this little one I've got at home. I got to slow the darn thing down. It goes so fast, I'm afraid it's going to self-destruct. And it's a whole lot faster than I need. I'm kind of slow. Blade holders are another issue, and that was the issue we had with the Delta. We lost a couple little bitty pieces out there, and luck was these guys on the forum, they change out those holders and customize them. So I was able to find a guy in New York City that had changed his out after I read enough of his posts online, and just asked him if he had these parts. And we're real fortunate, he mailed them to me. All of them he had. So I was pretty happy about that. But you just can't find those people everywhere. And, wow, we just started over. Well, we're struggling. There we go. Thickness planer, scroll saw, miter saw. Miter saw, you can have something pretty simple. I've got a Black & Decker that I bought when I built my house in '88, and I'm perfectly happy with it. It built my house and did all the oak trim in one of the other guys' houses that I worked with. Black & Decker put new bearings in it for me when they did a safety recall because they thought it needed it, and I've used it ever since. The one at the shop is probably the other end of it. and then Makita. Every brand's got their top of the line stuff now that's just super. You do compound miters and all kinds of goodies with it. But you got to remember that anytime you got all that super neat stuff, you got a lot more moving parts to adjust because they get out of adjustment maybe. Here again, depending on quality, or to even break. So kind of keep that in mind with a miter saw. Websites. I check this website multiple times every day. OWWN.org. They've got a website. They've got a for sale part. Bring out your dead. For all you old hippies, and I'm always looking for parts, or going to sell some parts if somebody wants something, or just give them to them. All kinds of help for repairing. These guys, they know the electrical, the machining part, and they're worldwide. You know, and some of the guys, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff these guys do. You can't discuss any Far Eastern machinery on it, though. That's a no-no. The guy that owns the site originally was from St. Louis, and Keith does not allow that, and they'll tell you that right off the bat. And then the other part is a sister site to that. Actually used to be called OWWM.com, but now it's been changed to Vintage Machinery, and it's owned by another Keith Rucker in Georgia, and that's a repository for all the documentation for thousands of machines. If you have a machine that's not made in the Far East, you can go on there and probably find all the written information you need to find. User's manual, part manual, all of it. Just go on there and just look it up. I mean, you could spend hours on this site. And then they've got sites where everybody's posted their stuff, and there's pictures of how they rebuilt them and stuff like that. So this is a fantastic site. This is a fantastic site. That's my two go-to sites. If I've got, like when I put the head in the big Powermatic for Wonderwoods, the only way I could put it in, and Scott thought of it, was took out about 5 rows of the inserts on one end. That allowed me to push it in and then pull it back. Well, these guys, they're into this big stuff, you know, so I documented that on there so that anybody wanting to put in a bird head needed to do that to save about another whole day's worth of work. And all those big castings are heavy, hard to pull apart. I mean, I was looking at destroying that whole machine right there in the middle of the shop till he thought of that. So these guys, they'll tell you how to do that because they've done it. There's guys that are professionals that all they do is rebuild equipment on there. All kinds of woodworking forums. I used to be on the router forum a lot. Back several years ago, I got onto that kick for a while. Then there's machine-specific sites that are Yahoo group sites. A lot of times now it might be Groups.io. I know the machinist site I'm on is a Group.io now instead of a Yahoo site. And then, well, I already mentioned the router forums. And I'm on several machine shop type forums. I do more metalworking now. And but there's all kinds of woodworking ones out there too. Facebook, same way. Several Facebook sites I'm on, and those guys are real helpful. It's a good way to find equipment. Okay. Any questions? Been pretty quick, but I just wanted to give you something to look for to be there, or look for to make sure that's a deal breaker. You know, and like Wayne says, don't be afraid of rust. You know, I picked up the base plate for a big antique delta tenoning jig, which also takes a miter gauge head if you want to do the ends of your stiles, build it on the shaper. And it was all rusted. I spent about a half hour sitting on a bucket with 2 razor blades and a scraper, and that thing looks just almost new now. I need to hit it with some pads, but it's going to look new. You know, and I gave $5 for it. Any other questions? It's been fun. Feel free to ask.
Well, that concludes the formal program for tonight. I'm sure Dan and Wayne would be willing to stick around for a few minutes if anybody wants to ask them questions, not in a public forum. But I think you'll agree they are both a wealth of knowledge, and we are lucky to have them part of our guild and to share that knowledge with us. So thank you both, and everyone, we'll see you next month, August 19th. Thank you.